Hello and welcome back. It is now September 22nd and it is a beautiful morning out here. A little bit of clouds off to the west, but I don't think it's going to do anything. I think we should have some pretty good weather this week. Last night there was pretty much no dew at all, so I think combines will be running here again shortly this morning. Here we have some relatively fresh canola stubble. This canola was just harvested on Friday. You can see this was in vigor canola. You can kind of tell by how many green stems are in here, but it sounds like it did yield pretty well. We are starting to see a little bit of volunteer from some of the canola that did shell out, although I don't think there should have been a whole lot, but you can see these down here already have a little bit of flea beetle damage on them. Well, some of the irrigated stubble is greening up quite a bit more than some of the dry land just because of some of the drier soil conditions, but you can see here we got some really nice strips of red root pigweed that are ambitious. You know, they're still pretty small, but trying to set lots of seed and flower, lots of mallow. There's big patches of plantain, and of course volunteer barley and regrowth on some of the wild oats as well. So that's all things to take a look at here this fall. Here on the edge of this field near an old yard site, there's an interesting weed that I hadn't seen for quite a while. This is called Gallant Soldier. It's actually part of the aster family. It belongs to the same family as daisies do. Hopefully it'll focus on those little flowers there. Also known as potato weed commonly. Don't see this a whole lot, but there's definitely quite the patch of it here at the side of this field. Still a fair bit of canola out there this week that needs to be combined. This field was swathed about 2 weeks ago, so it should be ready to go now. This is Nexera canola and should have some pretty decent yield potential in here. This is a dryland field, but it did look pretty good in crop. Well, we got corn silage coming off this week. This particular field is Pride 1027, looking pretty good here. We're not quite the dent stage yet. I'd like to see a little bit more starch build up in some of these kernels, but as you can tell by the overall appearance of these plants, they are starting to dry down. The last few days of warm wind have really taken the moisture down, so moisture samples are coming off in the low 60s, so we got to get this field done. Here's a good example of what I'm seeing in the corn so far this week. You can see this area over here is in a lower spot, had higher available moisture. You can see that corn is a lot greener and not quite as developed. We're not in dent stage or anything like that there yet. But once you come farther up this hill where we're more exposed to the wind, we've had significant desiccation from wind the last few days with some of these, 28, 29 degree days with 30, 40K winds. And you can see here that corn is rapidly drying down, which is bringing down the overall moisture of the whole field and making us have to harvest before some of the field is ready. So here in that drier area, you can see we're just starting to hit the dent stage here. These kernels are just starting to dent, and yet the plants themselves are really starting to dry down in that hot wind. Here in the low spot where the available moisture is higher, you can see these ears just aren't quite as developed. We're not in the dent stage yet, but we're not really all that far off either. If the whole field was like this, I'd say definitely hold off till next week, but you got to take those high dry spots into consideration and really look at the average moisture of what you can take off. If it's too dry to ensile, then that can be a real problem. You can see, here in this spot here, this Pride 1027 is, a good 12, 13 feet tall. The camera height is about 7 feet off the ground. So it's a pretty good looking crop in here. So far, sounds like it's coming off at 25 to 27 tons an acre. There's still quite a bit of standing canola out there. This particular field is a 35 series in vigor, and as you can see, it is still standing. So this was desiccated about 8 days ago now, so hopefully we should be able to get in here in the next couple days and get this field off. And even if it is in vigor, you can still get a little bit of pod shatter, so that wind the last couple days has definitely broken a few pods up in the top of the canopy. But I think that would happen no matter what variety you had in a field like this that is exposed to the wind. Overall, I mean, it's probably less than a percentage of pods have any sort of damage, so nothing serious. Well, it's a beautiful evening out here tonight. The wind has died down, so I'm going to try doing a little bit of drone photography. It is darker than it looks on camera. Cameras these days do an amazing job of adjusting for brightness. You can see we got a couple of our Fendt combines going over there, so I'm going to fly the drone and see what I can do.
Bang, 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 bang.
It's now 9:30 p.m. That's about all she wrote. I am out of batteries. I can't charge them fast enough, so corn silaging is still going on out here in the dark. Should be done here in probably a day or so. All this corn will be off. Well, I've had a lot of questions about cutworms this week from guys talking about if I had problems with cutworms in the field this spring, am I going to have problems with it again next year or this fall? Or am I going to have troubles going into a fall cereal? So the answer can be a little bit complicated. There is no sure way to predict it. We always used to say that cutworms followed something like a 6 or 7 year life cycle. So if you had, redback cutworms, the odds of you having another problem with them wouldn't happen for, roughly 7 years. And that may well be true. However, there is more than one species of cutworm out here. So you might have a problem with redback one year. The very next year, you might have a problem with dingy cutworms. So a lot of it has to do with their life cycle and breaking that green bridge. So depending on the species of cutworm, they are going to be laying eggs in, August, September, even into October. And the thing that those adult moths are looking for in order to lay those eggs is green material. They are laying their eggs on food sources for their young. So that food is going to be for fall and spring feeding. So if you have a field of, say, like the barley stubble behind me here, that has a bunch of volunteers starting to grow in it, that is a food source. Adults can be laying their eggs in that. Clumps of weeds, things like sow thistle, Canada thistle, dandelions can all attract different species of cutworms. So let's take a look and scout for some and see what we can find here. Checking out the barley in this field, one thing I found here, you can see this one here, this one's relatively freshly emerged, looks fine. But here right beside it, you can see a chunk of leaf material that's just sitting on the ground here. As well as this guy here looks like he's been cut off right at the ground level. So that really indicates there's probably a cutworm here pretty close by. Here's another one here, you can see has been chopped off right at ground level. And there is some dead leaf material there. So I would say there's a very good indication that there is some cutworms here. Now there was some dingy cutworms here this spring as well. It very well might be a new generation of dingy cutworms, or it might be something else. It's hard to say until I find one here. But of course they're going to be relatively small at the moment because they have just started their life cycle. So we're going to be looking for smaller caterpillars than we would in the spring. So whether you are or aren't finding cutworms in your field this fall, the best cure for them is prevention, and that prevention means breaking the green bridge. Just like most other insect species, cutworms, when they're actively feeding in growing conditions like this, if you starve them by controlling your volunteer and your weeds for a period of, say, 2 weeks, you'll have excellent results cutting back that population, or just not having egg laying in the first place because there's no green material for the adults to lay their eggs. And also remember that cutworms are not a species unto their own. They are vulnerable to predation just like all other insect species and, well, everything else. So lots of species of ground beetles and all sorts of other bugs and parasitic wasps and so on and so forth will cut their numbers down both in the fall and again in the spring. So even if you are finding them now, that does not mean that you are going to have a problem with them come the next spring. Well, lots of hemp is starting to come down across the countryside. This particular field has been swathed at some point in the last week and is now drying down. There's no combine going in here yet, but we're probably not too far off. Now, of course, hemp doesn't have a head on it or a pod, but it does kind of have I guess you'd call it a cola at the top, a complex of flowers. So you can see all of these maturing seeds which are in here and drying down. So it is an oil seed, somewhat like canola. You don't want to take it off too wet. It can heat in a bin, but pretty interesting to see. Still lots of fall rye going in as we near the end of September here. So this field is canola stubble, and we do have some rye in here that is starting to germinate. So it did get in deep enough at about a 1 inch in order to pick up enough moisture to germinate. So that's nice to see. You can see also we got a whole bunch of canola popping up in here. This was DeKalb canola. We did have a little bit of harvest losses, of course. It's pretty hard to get less than, a bushel of losses per acre when you're straight cutting canola. So there's always going to be some volunteer. And now that the soil has been disturbed, we got good seed to soil contact, all that canola is starting to pop. But that's why we use products like, DB878 Pro or Corex or something along those lines, so we can control those cotyledon canolas as they come up with a little bit of residual. I just found this interesting guy along the edge of a field. So this is a woolly bear caterpillar with a black, orange, black. Old wives' tale was you can tell the severity of the winter by the length of the orange stripe. So if that's any indication, we might have a little bit of a rough winter going on here. So this is the larval form of a, what's it called, a tiger moth, I believe. So this is a generalist feeder. These caterpillars eat kind of general vegetation. They don't particularly target any of our crop species, but you'll probably find the odd one here and there in a field like this. They do feed on, you know, things like rose bushes or weeds, even crop if necessary, but typically I've never heard of a problem with them yet. Well, that'll be it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.